Hi everybody, this is Joshua Kirk back with you guys once again on YouTube. And now it's time for episode 35 of Album of the Day, in which, I'm back from, a little vacation or trip that I recently had for about 4 days in State College, Pennsylvania. So yeah, I'm back from that vacation, back here at home in Arlington, Maryland, and it's time for another album review, just like I promise you, as always. I'd just like to, thank everybody for, subscribing and, saying nice things about my reviews. Like, for example, I'd like to thank Enter the Haggis for saying nice things about the t-shirt I was wearing in my review that I did previously, which was Back Midnight Vultures. And I'd like to thank everybody for subscribing to me and saying positive things about my videos. And plus, I'd like to thank everybody who may be listening to my podcast. I was on an episode of the Circus Life podcast, episode 47, and Justin Trawick, the host of that podcast, told me it was the funniest podcast they had ever done, and I agree 100% with him on that. It was the funniest podcast that's ever been on the Circus Life, especially when I did a BuzzFeed quiz, which he did, and I was also really honored to be able to talk longer on the show than I typically do. I typically only talk for about 10 minutes on the show, but, now I've talked for, a lot of the show and was, involved in the entire podcast, so I'd like to thank Justin Trawick and everybody else who was on the podcast for that, and Sean Russell, the guy who does all the, technical stuff on the podcast, too. But anyway, aside from that, let's get on to the review. Today's artist is a soul and R&B artist that really does, define what soul music should be, with the use of 2 guitars, bass, drums, congas, tenor and baritone saxophones, trumpet, vocals, and some background singers, and that's Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings. They were formed in around 1996. I think it was probably just the Dap-Kings maybe around that time, and then Sharon Jones basically got into the group and provided vocals. The band members of Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings write all the songs, and then Sharon Jones just sings on them. So anyway, I'm here to review their 4th album, which was released on April 6th, 2010. The album was called I Learned the Hard Way. And this is on Dap-Tone Records, the record label that Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings have. Made, the name Dap-Tone pretty much is inspired by the Dap-Kings, which is a group of a ton of different musicians that play with tons of different Dap-Tone artists on the label. But anyway, here's the cover, which has Sharon Jones and the whole band on it. Spine and the back, and then there's another photo of Sharon Jones there. This was produced by Bosco Mann, who plays bass in the group. The songs on here are The Game Gets Old, I Learned the Hard Way, the title track, Better Things, Give It Back, Money, The Reason, which is a little interlude of basically the Dap-Kings without Sharon Jones singing on it. Window Shopping, She Ain't a Child No More, I'll Still Be True, Without a Heart, If You Call, and Mama Don't Like My Man. And this was recorded at a studio called the Dap-Tone Records House of Soul. Credits for production and string arrangements and engineers and everything. And ignore that little weird noise in the background. I don't know what it is, but just ignore it. But it says the lineup for the Dap-Kings is Thomas Brennick, Binky Grip Tight, Dave Guy, Ian Hendrickson Smith, Bosco Mann, Homer Steinweiss, Neil Sugarman, and Fernando Boogaloo Velez. So anyway, I'm gonna show you the inside of it. There's the credits, the liner notes, like the non-instrument liner notes are on the back cover of the CD, but on the inside of it, basically just the liner notes for the instruments and who played what on each song. And then there's the CD, as well as other Dap-Tone record CDs. And I also have it on vinyl. I went to this music store in State College, Pennsylvania while I was there, called the Music Underground, and they had a copy of this album on vinyl. So here's a cover of it, spine, and the back, and then there's like the track listing and liner notes and everything. Doesn't mention the instruments, but it does list all the musicians that contributed to this album, unlike the CD that shows all of the instrument liner notes. So, not very much bells and whistles going on with the packaging, but that doesn't really matter to me. As long as it's good quality music, I'm fine with it being kind of stripped down packaging sometimes, because sometimes less is more, I think. But anyway, let's go on to the track listing. The first song on here is called The Game Gets Old, and this is kind of a song that kind of, hooks you into the album and sort of gives you a clue of what the album's going to be like overall. It's got this really huge sound of drums, bass, guitars, percussion, strings, horns, and a timpani too, as well as some little bits of vibraphone in there, as well as some lyrics kind of about everybody kind of playing a game of love and, kind of seeing how sometimes playing that game of love and trying to love somebody can get old very fast. So like, love can be, a good thing in life, but at the same time, it can also kind of be a struggle and, a stretch, especially if you're playing the battle of a game of love, basically. Next is the title track, I Learned the Hard Way. The next track on here is the title track, I Learned the Hard Way, the second track. This is like the lead single from the album too. And the song, the song has, some great instrumentation in there, like some barroom piano, and, the horns sound great, as well as kind of a flute in the background accompanying the drums, bass, guitars, percussion, strings, and timpani in there too. And it's kind of a song about how, we at first think someone is good for us, but then later we kind of realize how we all learn the hard way that someone isn't right for us no more. So I think this is a song that I think anybody can relate to. I think anybody can really connect to this album. I think, if you've broken up with somebody that you realized isn't right for you, this would probably be a good album for you to listen to kind of make you notice how, musicians kind of agree with you on this, that, sometimes you kind of have to make a tough decision to try and love somebody or break up with that person because he isn't treating you right at all. Track number 3 is called Better Things, and this is a fun song. I love the little, saloon piano in the background, and it's played by, the Dap-Kings' original second guitar player, like the older second guitar player, Thomas Brennick. It's just, musically it's just, fun song, but I especially love the piano in there, the piano playing these little notes of do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do. I love that piano in there. And lyrically it's kind of a song about being happy that, you don't have to remember someone that wasn't good to you at all. So I think the song is kind of about just kind of, breaking up with someone that isn't good for you, and then just kind of feeling happy about the fact that you don't have to deal with them anymore. There are those kind of songs that are kind of hopeful and kind of, about like, not having to deal with something negative anymore. Although sometimes, you might find that person and you might have to deal with the negativity that can come out of people sometimes. Track number 4 is called Give It Back, and this song has kind of this old school kind of 60s Beatles kind of feel to it because of the old school feel of the guitar, bass, and the drums. And, this is kind of a song about like people just never really giving back the love that they need to give back to people. Track number 5 is called Money, and this is a song kind of a nod to the fact that a lot of groups, including Sharon and the Dap-Kings, need that money so that way they can make music. Despite all the people kind of freaking out about all the money artists like Sharon and the Dap-Kings have to pay, they kind of, they realize how you may not believe it, but there's nothing evil about money. So like, money is the one thing that's pretty important about artists as well as kind of doing the music that you want to do. So yeah, you kind of have to deal with money and, bad people sometimes and the negativity that come out of like both of those things. The song kind of starts out slow with horns, drums, bass, guitar, piano, and vibraphone, and maybe a little bit of timpani or something like that. And then, the song gets faster, and, they're kind of, doing kind of a slight figure of speech with money here. Instead of, like, calling it, like, saying, we need these bills or something like that. Instead, they're, like, saying, like, they're kind of using money as, like, maybe a name for a person or something. Kind of realizing how, the person may not like you, but, you're trying to get them to appreciate you. And then in the background, there's like these male backup singers that just kind of yell at, in the background, money, which, are credited as the Bushwick Callers. So I don't know who it is. Could be some guys from the Dap-Kings, or it could be some other people from Bushwick, New York, or something like that. I think it actually could be members of the Dap-Kings or something like that, doing the little money shouts in the background. Track number 6 is called The Reason, and this is an instrumental track. Sharon Jones doesn't sing on this track, which I know might turn some people off, because, they realize how it is Sharon Jones of the Dap-Kings, so they expect Sharon Jones to sing on every song on the record, but she doesn't sing on this one. But at the same time, there's still some amazing kind of instrumental breakouts coming from the Dap-Kings, especially with Neil Sugarman's amazing tenor saxophone solos. So it's basically, all the guys in the Dap-Kings play their usual instruments, accompanied by a vibraphone played by Tony Pasner of the Bushwick Philharmonic, who plays throughout this record. And, I think the tenor saxophone and the vibraphone both sound nice in here. Track number 7 is called Window Shopping, and this is kind of a song about, realizing how there are some people that kind of say they're gonna, settle down and, come back to you, but they keep window shopping, and they keep making you wait endlessly, and, that can kind of annoy you a little bit. So yeah, it's kind of a song where you don't want that person to, keep window shopping and keep, leaving you behind, but at the same time, you kind of realize how, that person is not really the right one for you, and you might just want to leave them alone and let them keep window shopping, because, there are those people that let good things pass them by. And musically, the song has some great kind of bluesiness to it with the organ and, with the organ and everything, and the background vocals, as well as the female background singers too. The song, and plus the song kind of, takes blues music kind of to the next level by putting a string section in there, and you wouldn't typically hear that in a blues song. but you would, hear a string section maybe typically in a bunch of Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings songs. I mean, Naturally has a lot of songs like that, and so does 100 Days, 100 Nights, and, this album too. So far the only two albums without strings on a Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings record are the first Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings album, Dap Dippin' with Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings, as well as the most recent album by Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings, which I actually showed to you in a CD update called Give the People What They Want, which was released on January 14th this year. So yeah, Window Shopping is just an excellent song. I love the bluesy feel that it has. Track number 8 is called She Ain't a Child No More, and this is a song that I also kind of relate to, too, because it's a song about parents kind of putting their kids through such torture because they're like older and they're like doing things when they're older that they weren't supposed to when they were young, like for example, drinking, for example, or maybe smoking cigarettes or something like that. So yeah, it's kind of a song about mothers can't be so reckless and wild trying to treat their sons like children even when they're an adult. So yeah, it's kind of a song about just not letting children grow and, just kind of thinking that, drinking is going to destroy their life or something like that. So it makes sense they put, some pretty, some pretty tango-ish kind of feel to the song because, its dark lyrics really do match. It's kind of catchy little melodies is in there. So it's a catchy, cool song with lyrics that I think are spot on, in my opinion. Because, why should parents have to, put their kids through, such torture in life? Track number 9 is called I'll Still Be True, and it brings back kind of the bluesy element with the organ and the congas and the horns and everything. And, it's kind of a song about, still being true to somebody who just takes you for granted way too many times in life. Track number 10 is called Without a Heart, and this is a fun little song. It kind of reminds me, once again, it kind of has that Beatles jangle a little bit in there. So it kind of reminds me of old school, Beatles, what I would find on Magical Mystery Tour or something like that. And, it's got kind of this marching band feel because of the drums and the horns and the guitars. And, it's kind of a song about how, a person without a heart is like a body without a soul, that's for sure. So it's kind of about how without a heart we might be lacking the love that we need to give to people, but at the same time, without a heart we wouldn't care about, people that are, just trying to do harm to us or something like that. And track number 11 is called If You Call, and this is a song that, kind of has that old school kind of soul feel to it. It kind of reminds me of old school soul music from it reminds me of Philadelphia soul music, like Gamble and Huff or something like that. So it kind of reminds me of old Philadelphia soul music when I hear it. But at the same time, kind of with Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings' original flavor to it. I love the guitars and the catchy little drums, as well as the nice little B3 organ and the big horns too. A great song musically. And the closing track is called Mama Don't Like My Man, and this is kind of the most, old-fashioned, soul-sounding kind of track on the whole record. It's kind of a song about how, we love somebody, and that person treats us right, but then, our parents tell us, that person's no good for us either because the way he's dressed, or because he smokes cigarettes, or whatever, but we're trying to just kind of convince them that the person isn't rough around the edges. They just do things that may or may not be good for them sometimes, like smoking cigarettes, for example. They're not rough around the edges. They're just kind of people that kind of tend to be a little different than us, but still treat us right. So I think this is kind of a song about how family members kind of tend to react to somebody loving another person that does things that parents don't want them to do. And it's got great background vocals. It's just Sharon Jones' voice, a guitar, some foot stomping, and some claps and foot stomping, and some female background vocals. But I think it's nice that they decided to close this album with something a little more stripped down, without all the horns and stuff. That's just kind of like old school soul from the 50s or 60s. In fact, when I listen to this album, this may have been recorded at around 2009, about a year before this album was out on April 6th, 2010. But it sounds like it could have been a record that could have dropped and could have been cut in the 60s or the 70s or something like that. But, that's what I love about them. They're kind of making something kind of old school, but at the same time kind of making it, kind of, what soul music is meant to be from now on in the future. So I think Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings are the future soul icon, I think. About 10 years later, I think they'll be classics, I think. They should be, because they're an excellent soul group. Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings is just an excellent soul group, in my opinion. So overall, production-wise, the album sounds great musically. I think the things that especially sound great. I especially love the horns, the strings, and the vibraphone. I think they're all just, great instruments for this album. Lyrically, it's an album that I totally connect to, because it is mostly about terrible, awful relationships that people just tend to deal with sometimes. Sometimes with a person, they realize it's not that good for them. Somebody tells them not to be with that person, then they fall in love with that person, and then eventually they realize they were right. This person is not good for me. So I think this album is totally, pretty much something everybody can relate to lyrically. And so musically it sounds great, lyrically it's great, and vocally Sharon Jones just belts it out with all that soul, It's very important that you really sing with a lot of soul if you're calling yourself a soul singer. And I totally think Sharon Jones totally is leading by example of that. So I really like this album. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. It's Sharon Jones' best. It's Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings' best record, as well as their strongest album, I think. Naturally is a great album. I love it, but this album I think I like a little more because it's just a lot stronger, and I think the more experience a group has, the better their music sounds, I think, on later releases. And, the band pretty much agrees, so there you go. That's my review of Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings' 2010 album, their fourth album, I Learned the Hard Way. I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you really like this album, I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments section. And, I'll see you for review number 36.